So I'm really happy to introduce Torrey Podmajersky. I don't feel like she needs a lot of introduction, probably to many of you. But Torrey is the author of a best-selling book, Strategic Writing for UX, which is published by O'Reilly. I believe there's a second edition in the works, Torrey, and also the president of Catbird Content. Torrey helps teams business and customer problems using content and design, and she's consulted on and created inclusive and accessible consumer and professional experiences for a whole bunch of big companies and startups, including Google, NetApp, and Microsoft. Torrey's also very involved in the content design community, so she was one of the main drivers behind the Content Design Manifesto, which a lot of you will have come across, as well as working with actually several of the people who've spoken at the meetup in the past. So really delighted to have Torrey here. What we've asked Torrey to speak about is, because Torrey has a lot of expertise in working with content in product, and we know that that's an area that a lot of people here will be curious about. Perhaps you have actually started working in product and you're feeling some of the differences in your job, or maybe it's an area that you're interested in possibly moving into, or you would just like to know what it's all about. So Torrey's going to give us a bit of a brief talk, but there'll be lots of time for questions at the end. So with no further ado, I'd love to hand over to Torrey.
Thank you so much, Angus. Before we get started, I have to recognize that I see a cat in Cat O'Neill's frame, and who looks amazingly like this cat, right?
I forgot to introduce. Yeah, I forgot to introduce Hawthorne.
Yeah,
Sorry.
This is Hawthorne,
Sorry,
my cat. Oh,
welcome, Hawthorne.
Oh, that looks so sweet. Okay, now that I'm done being distracted by cats, hopefully not done being distracted by cats. Let's be real. Let me share my screen. While I am doing that, can I get a show of hands or emoji or something? How many of you are doing content in product right now? No hands up. Okay, a few hands up, a few emoji.
Okay. Oh, yeah, 8. I think we've got 8.
Excellent.
9.
Excellent.
Yeah, 10. Something. Yeah.
So you'll be able to tell me where I've just gone totally wrong here. Raise your hand if you've been doing, say, documentation work or technical writing. Some hands up, yeah. How about marketing writing or website writing? I am lumping those together. Okay, so that is a lot of what we're doing in this group. Okay, this is great for me to know, because then I know more about what to say and what not to say. Actually, I'm very bad at what not to say. So let's get right to it. Angus has already introduced me, so I don't need to do that at all. What content are we talking about? Here is an example from the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration website. This is a website maintained by the US government so you can see weather coming up in your area. So this is an example. I know it to be very text heavy. I'm just using it as an example, not necessarily of good content design, but that content design is all around us. Any kind of content can be designed. My specialty is content design for user experiences like this one. So the bulk of my work is on sites like these, though I didn't make this one. So here on this site, all of these strings that string means just piece of text in code lingo. All of these that I've outlined in pink are UX text. They each had to be chosen and designed to fit that space. They're the buttons, the labels. This is the content that is the product. And also, there's even more content that a content designer like me would advise about. the units of measurement we show, how those units should be displayed. And I've outlined those in bright green here. Outlined in yellow is dynamic content, which the content designer would also take as a constraint and possibly advise about, like how we say the location, like Seattle, Washington. So you'll notice that this interface is mostly content. All of it together is the product. If it wasn't there, it's just not much of a product. It stops being useful pretty quickly when it doesn't have the content, even though all of the data is right there. No, we just can't tell what it is. So what I want to talk about is what doing content design is like, and I'm going to do so at a really high level. I'm going to talk about the why, the what, and the how we do it in a way that I hope will help contrast with what you might see in your day-to-day world, except for the 8 of you who also do product content. And please do ask questions and bring up places where you think I'm just wrong. So I expect you'll see many similarities, especially as we get started, say, with these business impacts. So let's talk through them. We want to reduce some things in our businesses, or for our businesses, and we want to increase some other things. We want to reduce support costs, and we'll do that through improved usability of the product itself. We want to reduce liability. We'll do that through careful disclaimers, solid explanations. We'll do that with clear instructions. We want to reduce time it takes to develop that product in the first place through clear, documented design decisions, so that the developer is never at a loss for what should be going on this screen right here. And then there's the things we want to increase. We want to increase revenue by enabling the product to begin with, that service, those goods that people are paying for. We want to increase engagement by enticing people to return for more because they had such a good experience doing it the first time, or at least it satisfied their needs, even if they didn't super enjoy it. We want to increase user success by ensuring that accessibility and that usability. We want to increase the brand affinity because we need to be at a high level, or at a goal level. We would reflect the brand in every phrase we use. We want to then also increase team alignment by introducing and enforcing consistent terminology, because whenever we're working with teams, as soon as they start to diverge in their terminology, the words they use for a particular concept, then they're about to diverge in how they approach it too. And that's going to be difficult. Okay. So that is about why we do this product content and why people like me have jobs doing that. But what is it that we make? The things that we make is not separate from the screens or the prototypes or the notifications. We need to work in those products doing that. The products, the designs for those screens can't stand alone. And the text for them, like I have on the screen here, like a screenshot of a spreadsheet here. I just listed out all of the strings that you can see on the screen here and put them in alphabetical order. And you'll notice it's not a useful list that way. It might be useful to scan things in that way for some reasons, but it is not a great place to design that content. I need to be designing it in the screens themselves. The content we create, those artifacts then are the same artifacts produced by the designer or by the developer. Sometimes we work directly with the developer and it goes right into code. Yeah. So using Google Docs or Word Docs for our first drafts is not something that's particularly useful because it frequently needs so much more reworking once it gets into a screen. Now, let's talk about how the work is done. At a very high level, very little of the actual creative work I do is by myself, even less than a quarter of it. While I get some time by myself with screens, setting them up and or working on the Figma that a designer has set up, in general, I'm working more time with the other people doing that design work than I am by myself. And my estimate is about a 3-to-1 ratio. So this is also extremely iterative, extremely experimental. Like a lot of design work, it's also minimal record keeping. It's intense collaboration, and the constraints keep changing as you do it and make new decisions. So documenting all of that as you go is extremely difficult. The ambiguity is incredibly high, but decreasing the more work you do with the people. And for those reasons, once we get into organizing that content, it's messy, y'all. There are a couple of CMSs available now. And actually, for the second edition of my book, I'm going to meet with people at Frontitude and at Ditto and possibly others to learn more about them, because I haven't had a chance to use them yet. And I know that, and I've definitely run up against the barriers to using them inside companies where it's just not part of the tool chain, or they're not willing to incorporate another software as a service. So the source of truth for the final strings, the final text, my final work product might be in those Figma files. It might be in separate string docs, especially in regulated industries that require documentation of how the decisions were made in a user interface. In the US, that's definitely true in healthcare applications, where you need to document the progress of how a thing was designed. And that includes the content. Keeping those up to date with the daily churn in the designs, super hard, and yet needs to be booked into that time. Most teams, though, don't have that constraint. For a lot of teams, though, the source of truth is the code. And being able to jump into that code is sometimes seen as a privilege granted to the content designers, and sometimes is just an expectation. You're in the code just like everybody else. And that code can look like this. This is a code sample I took from Localizely about an Apple strings example file. So the code at the publish layer, at least, is in general handled by developers, because they are, owners of that space. And it may be minutes or months after design complete, or anywhere in between. Now, it may or may not be available to be reviewed in PRs or in bug bashes by me or by my designers or by the PM. It might go live and we see it for the first time in a bug on Wired Magazine and go, oh no, how did that get into the code? So we may just not be aware in the moment of commit. In really healthy organizations, I have just set up notifications when anybody is touching the string file. I find out, and I can I'm either included in the PR to begin with, or I can just ping them and say, hey, I noticed that you didn't copy paste. You typed it in by yourself. Could we fix that, please? So this happens. So that's at the moment of publish. But as we all know, things need maintenance. So how do we change this when it needs to change? In general, content in product is static until a new feature ships. Like, it takes a shipping cycle. And in some teams, that's daily ship cycles, or weekly, or every 2 weeks, or whatever. Some, it's a much longer cycle. And we need to detect that there's a problem or something that could be improved. We need to file bugs and fix them, and a relaunch needs to happen. It is also usually true that content is not particularly searchable in a meaningful way. Like, you may be able to go and do a text search through the strings files. And not every piece of content necessarily goes into the string file where it belongs, and it gets localized and all of that. Sometimes they get stuck in everywhere else. So maintenance is hard and is treated as a new launch activity. And then there's systematizing. Content design systems are extremely diverse where they exist at all. They generally include principles like design principles or product principles, and these are to be used as inspirations and tiebreakers and guardrails on like, hey, is this doing what we say it should be doing for its users and for the business and in its community? It also contains its personality, and this is critically important inside the product, just as a product design system would specify the fonts and the colors to use, the type ramp, the spacing, all of that. The content carries a lot of personality, and we need to define how that content is supposed to change and adapt in different circumstances so that it can be consistent across the product, but also not robotic and stilted. And then there's all the practicalities. These are like terminology, the words that are used, they're reserved for special meanings within the experience. Like you might say user or person. You might use account and profile and they mean different things like that. You might also specify how grammar should be used. What are the consistent spellings of common words? Do we use contractions? How do we feel about acronyms, etc.? And there it gets really blended into the style guide territory that is sort of the meat and potatoes of systematizing a lot of other content. And frequently, like I know at Google, when I worked there, we used the material voice and tone guidance. We used material guidance in our designs. And it said, yeah, if you have a question not covered here about the words, go use the AP guide. Sure, makes sense. So yeah, so that is my very short talk about why, what, and how we do content design in the product itself. And those are the things that I do when I do all of these catbird content things. So whether it's delivering designs, content designs directly, talking about skills for content designers, developing teams, doing training and facilitation, etc. So let's talk. What have we got?
Fabulous. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Torrey. Yeah, so fire your questions at Torrey. Your questions about, I shouldn't say fire. Yeah, please type your questions very gently into the chat. Shouldn't be using those kind of military metaphors, should I? So just already a comment from Damien. Yes, you're in Damien's head, Torrey. No one in product ever really wants to take time to talk about content infrastructure or content maturity. Is that something that resonates with you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's frequently we are the only content person on a particular product or feature or set of features across multiple products, depending on how our teams are organized. And what that means is, like anybody else who is a solo practitioner in the team that they're in, you sort of need to show up and be a self-service model. Like you need to be taking care of your own needs, putting on your own mask before helping others. Sort of like the attorney in a group in a corporate environment. You don't have the attorney come to you and say, yeah, I'm the attorney and I really need to be having a library of relevant current case law about these things. And you would expect that person, that attorney, to be faced with developers going, can we help with that? I don't know how we help with that. Sure. And the same for content design. They don't know how to help us make decisions about overall voice. We just need to bring it.
Yeah. So there's still a lot of evangelism is still a big part of the job for a lot of people, as well as doing the work.
Yeah.
Which we might wish wasn't the case, but it kind of just is.
You know, I want to separate evangelism about like here's my job and you should value it and you should let me work with you and all of these things, that core value evangelism, versus the here's my job, you know it's valuable, and I need these things to do it well. Right? There's two very different modes there.
Yeah.
That I think we can get into and get out of the defend our own value piece.
Yeah. There is. I mean, I've noticed seeing content designers talk among themselves, and this probably isn't just a product thing. There can be a little bit of defensiveness and a bit of kind of reminds me at times of the Arrested Development magicians union with this big sign that says "We demand to be taken seriously." If you if you remember that, well, that's kind of how it can come across if we're too So yeah, I like that way of sort of separating the two things. I have a question about. Oh, good. Oh, sorry, we'll do Lorraine's question first because that is a good question. Back to basics. What are products? How would you define writing for a product as opposed to writing for something else?
Yeah, so I would say the distinction here is writing within a product versus about a product. And by product, I mean, well, let's expand it to products and services, which in my book, I generalized to just experiences. Are you making something that somebody needs to use and, follow some sort of process or receive information from or anything like that, that in general is digital in the spaces that I work, but sometimes isn't? So gosh, product turns out it's very hard to define. When I'm talking about this kind of content design, though, it's about writing the content that makes up the experience so that it is usable at all. Like one of my favorite, I collect images of UX content in the wild. There was one at one of the first conferences I spoke at that was inside a bathroom, a little taped sign above the handle of the door handle, and it had a diagram saying locked and unlocked, because this apparently was a mistake that had happened many times. And that's all it needed. It needed to show what is the locked state and the unlocked state and label them. So that is UX content. The hilarious anecdote published online about it is content about that UX content. Does that help, Lorraine?
Great. Thanks for asking the question too, Lorraine. Sometimes we forget to actually cover the basics, but I think that, I mean, what you're saying is also sort of complicated by the fact that we definitely see what we would consider non-product content or website content, but the organization's trying to treat that kind of content as a product. So they'll have a website, but they'll have a product manager for the website, and they'll be trying to introduce sort of product language, which sometimes doesn't quite work. But there's, I guess there's a sense, whether it's true or not, that product has more prestige than just kind of boring little websites. So it is complicated. There's no simple definition. Lots of questions coming in, so let's keep going. Anna had a question, and I think this is a really important one. Do you have any ideas on how to get into product work coming from web or marketing content strategy? I'll tell you some feedback we've had from product people in Australia is that one of the biggest challenges is actually just getting used to that faster paced cycle of work. You don't ever have months to do a thing. It's always weeks or days, and you're often being controlled by other people's by cycles that are externally sort of imposed. So is that part of it, and any other kind of?
It's totally part of it. So I will say, in the research I did last winter about what are the skills that content folks have when they're doing content design, what what are the skills we are using in those jobs, and what backgrounds did we come from? And about half of respondents, of the 970 some people, when I did that initial analysis, half of them had marketing backgrounds and came from content marketing as a field. So the doors are wider open there than to perhaps any other previous career. And there's no college diploma that says, oh, I'm a content designer now, I'm a product content designer, I'm a UX content designer. Nah, there's nothing like that. So the getting into that product work, in general, a lot of the hiring barriers are having a portfolio that says, I have done this work, or I know what this work means. And the portfolios can be very simple to show that you understand how, like, the impacts that it can be made, the problems that it can solve, and how you would go about solving those. But then, Angus, to your point, once you're in that role, it can be like the proverbial drinking from the fire hose. And you go, but wait, when do I get a chance to back off and just do the work? Well, practically never. There's no backing off to do the work. It's doing the work in front of people all the time. Just like the PMs are doing work in front of people all the time. And just like the designers are doing work in front of people all the time. Being clever about carving out your calendar and being like, hey, when do you need that by? I've got some heads down time. I can really concentrate on it. At this time, can I get back to you in that short turnaround with some ideas? Or with some questions, which is even better, because you will have questions after that. Can definitely work.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that was a very complete answer, though.
No, well, yeah, I think so, and I think we'll probably keep, we'll probably have more on this along the same lines about how we sort of translate from one part of content to another. But I think that one of the questions I had, which is sort of related to what you're saying, is about being smart with time. Is one of the business benefits that you talked about is the reducing the time to develop, and I can imagine. I can imagine if you were working in a team that had never had a content designer before, you might be skeptical about that. You might think, well, how is adding an extra person to the process going to reduce my time to develop? Isn't it just going to add a bottleneck? Or if every word has to pass through this gatekeeper, is this just going to mean things take more time? So what sort of has to work? What has to be working well in an organization for that benefit to actually be realized?
Yeah. So that issue of being seen as a gatekeeper through which all the text must pass is can be really toxic, and it can get toxic on the turn of a dime. No, that's not even a phrase. It can get toxic extremely quickly. And that's because you are seen as the barrier to progress. And it is a very fast trip from I represent the problem to I am the problem. I don't want to be the problem. None of us want to be the problem. It's not why we get into any of this. But if instead we get into a space where it's understood what we do and that it brings value. And when I have come in new to a team, I say, great, why do you want me here? Why are you adding this person to your team? And sometimes a team is adding a person because they've been told to. And here it is like, why do you think you need me? Why do you think this person thought that you need me? Is this just ego stroking because they want more direct reports? Like, let's have a real conversation about it. And let's do it off the record without a paper trail so that we can really establish some connection there and not have a finger pointing session later on. And what I ask about is the ways that I know I save people time later is all of those meetings between high-level stakeholders where they argue about content and then make the developer recode all of the words later on, and then redo bug bashes and then resend things to translation oh my goodness, there is so much churn that happens when executives get a hold of the screens, because they're like, oh, this content is terrible. Nobody really thought about this. So it's up to me to rewrite all these things. Whew. So you get somebody who has to add you to their team, and they're like, you're just going to slow me down, aren't you? And I'm like, no. If you're good on the content and you're not worried about VP XYZ yelling at you about this, or worried about legal changing it, or worried about legal dumping a bunch of text on you at the very end, if you're not worried about any of those things, cool. You don't need me at all. I will just work on these other things. And when it comes up in meetings, whether I've reviewed it, you say that, no, Torrey hasn't seen this because I thought we could handle it. And they go, oh, I'm not sure I want that on my head. So
Nice.
I remind them of the pain that will come later, is the short answer.
Great. Thanks, Torrey. So we've got lots of comments about also people also spotting content in the wild, including bathrooms. Bathrooms are really, I mean, yeah, the fact that you can build a bathroom that makes it ambiguous whether or not a door is locked is kind of boggles the mind, doesn't it? But yeah. But this was I really like this comment from Daphne around that sort of transition from marketing or other types of content to product. So some marketing folks have simply followed the user journey, flows, and pain points over to the product stack from marketing, where they used to reside. Apps and websites are immersive and expensive enough that the user has to be involved, considered from the get-go. So I think that's something that content people really have in common, is that we're not good at sticking in our lanes. We will, you know, and I'm sure we've all had the experience of being required to create a piece of help content for a process that is fundamentally broken, and sort of saying, well, we can put lipstick on a pig, but is there any chance we can just go and fix the process? You know? So it's that kind of, if you really have an eye on the full user journey, then it just naturally you'll become interested in the content in the product as well as the content that's about the product. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. So sorry, just looking through, lots of comments. So one from Kelly, we're currently working on some big content projects, more instructional content in the product, well-structured help articles, and would love to show the impact of good content to leadership. How do you show or prove the impact of your work, e.g. metrics measures? So that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do you show
it's
the
a great question, Kelly. Thanks for asking it. I start with, why are we doing this project at all? There is a business reason why content people are asked to do a thing. So what is that business reason? Great. How do you know it's a problem right now? What are you measuring? And one of the hardest things to do, one of the hardest things for me to learn to do, I don't know if it's hard for everybody, was to, instead of going, oh yeah, that's a hard problem, and digging in and having lots of ideas about how to solve it and coming up with a plan and showing everybody how great this plan would be. Wait, stop before doing any of the fun part, because that part is actually fun. Say, how are we going to measure success? And how are we going to show a difference at the end? And it's tedious and difficult, and sometimes can stop progress entirely so that nothing ever gets done on it. And by nothing ever, I mean nothing until it hurts so bad that they're willing to either measure something, which is expensive, or to say, you know what, we're going to say that this is required for these reasons, and we are going to call it successful when. But unless somebody at a high level is going to say that, yes, we have an idea of what successful looks like, whether that is a measured something, and that can be measured in the well-structured help articles are actually one of the easiest things to measure if you have control over your website analytics, because you can be saying, how many people are coming to this article? How many people are searching these keywords in our help infrastructure? How many people are bouncing out of this article and then looking for other articles, and because they are presumably then not finding what they need? So you can measure all of those things, but you have to have agreement. Okay, maybe not you. I want to have agreement with the powers that be before I start solving it about how difficult this problem is and what they will agree that success looks like. I kind of think of it instead of like them coming to me and we're like this and they're saying, we have this hard problem. And I'm like, yeah, let's fix it this way. They go, this is a hard problem. And I go with them and go, oh yeah, that's super hard. Yeah, how do you want to measure that? What do you think success looks like? What's all this going on? Why don't I have actual puppets? That would be so much funnier. So does that make sense? Like that stop of action, because there's a zillion metrics, there's a zillion measures. There's some measures that are kind of dumb, like just overall volume of how many people came to the website is not a UX metric. Might be a great metric for your demand generation.
Yeah, I know, I love that, and I can see so much of that in the way that I act, and probably a lot of people here, because we're problem solvers. We like to be helpful, and yeah, so jumping so quickly into solving the problem before you've probably defined it or defined how you're going to measure it. Brilliant. Another great example from Sonia, or a sort of a real life example of making that switch. So her company had demo time for product updates. I was tech writing and saw the demos and noticed the UI content was not that great. So I contacted the product managers and asked if I could do some reviewing. They started to see the improvements in value add, and I slowly moved across into UI content work. What a fabulous, what a fabulous real life example.
Hot damn, so, Sonia, you're doing it right. Yeah.
Lindor was kind enough to mention some training that we run that was helpful for her. I should also mention, Torrey, you offer lots of training as well. So yeah, definitely check out Catbird content for what Torrey sort of offers in that space, probably more specific product related. So our course it's general content design, and we'd like to think that the principles still apply.
Principles definitely apply.
Yeah. But for the product specific stuff, Torrey's your person. So nice question from Grant. Torrey, you mentioned code strings and tech stuff a few times, including a slide. Do you think content designers could benefit from upskilling their tech expertise? That's a great question, Grant. What benefits might accrue? Chelsea Larson at Expedia advises getting some basic Python awareness, particularly as we're increasingly contributing to LLM training, the big AI. So yeah, we managed to get this far without mentioning AI, but it's definitely
Okay, so I'm of two minds about this. On the one hand, so the very first documentation I ever wrote, very first tech doc I ever wrote, was about making content human readable but encoded for computer storage using less than and greater than symbols and making tags. Like that's how old I am, y'all. I was writing content about HTML. Actually, it was about SGML before HTML was a glimmer in its creator's eyes. So all that to say, like, I go way back in code. I've learned more languages and forgotten them than I am probably likely to learn in the future. So I don't have a good sense of, does this help? Because I don't even know when I'm using that muscle. What I do know is that Chelsea Larson has found value in it. I know that Christina Halverson has never learned about coding. And I hope that I'm not just outing her here, because she has left. She's like, I don't know any code. So I don't think I'm outing her with that. So sometimes we don't need to know how to code. Being able to look at code, and I showed it in a particularly plain vanilla way. where most code things that you would actually look at in real life would actually be color coded. So the comments are a different color than the string variables, are a different color than the whatchamacallits, commands and stuff. So it is less challenging to look at and to read as code. And especially if you're just like, oh, I just need to know some syntax to put around things like extra punctuation for this funny space. When content folk learn these things, in my experience, they go, oh, that's all? Okay. And it's always like that. And here's the thing, the code languages, it is always like that. This is not like English, which is like, oh, the grammar is like this, except in the next sentence and every other sentence. Sorry. Yeah. No, code is extremely structured and follows rules.
Yes, the consequences of missing a semicolon are very different in code compared to prose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah. Thanks, Torrey.
So,
Lorian's pointed out I missed a question from Sarah earlier. So sorry, Sarah, that wasn't deliberate. Sarah's question was, have you ever had success in increasing frequency of launch cycles? If so, how did you manage it? It's so hard when content is tied to code. So this idea that your content, you really want this bit of content to be updated, but it's not going to happen for another 2 weeks or whatever. So
in my experience, it is always, always, always a one-off request. Like if I need something faster, then I've got to go make the argument with the developer who owns that part of the code and the ops people who own these pieces and say, like, can we build a coalition that says, yes, we should do an out-of-band launch? What's that going to take? Is there something else going on that I can learn about and, hitch this wagon to that? That actually is frequently more successful. Say, hey, we're going to be launching this thing anyway, so could we get in here and also do this? The problem, it tends to be that you also need to kick off a localization cycle, and that can be expensive and take a lot longer than, oh, just this one hot fix. So it always requires conversation. It is almost always worth doing. And if it's a very bad thing, like, hey, we forgot a semicolon in the legal disclaimer and it changes the meaning there. So we're going to do a hot fix just for that, aren't we? Right now. Yes, we are.
Yes. Yeah, fabulous. And on the code and language kind of question, I think Damien had a nice comment that language can be a type of code on its own. So we often have to design content patterns, and content patterns are very adjacent to code. So I think, the way we often need to think about language is we're not writing poetry. We're trying to write clear, unambiguous content, and that can be, a semicolon can be just as important as it would be in a piece of code. It breaks things in different ways, but it can still break things. It can be poetry in itself, quite right, Lorian. Yes. So a question from Kelly: as a content designer, how do you work with product designers? When do you get involved when a screen has been created, and what expectations do you have of their first draft of copy in product, or handing over the requirements for you to do that?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. In general, I do not expect them to hand over anything. And I try to get away from that as a model, and this is a natural model for product designers with each other too, is I work on a thing, then I hand it off to you and you work on a thing, and then we hand it back and forth. But with the tools that most of us are working in right now, we don't have to do that. And I tell them, like, oh, are we having a kickoff for this? Or if that's already happened and I'm coming in later in the project for any reason at all, and I don't need to assume that it was bad intent, then great. Can I sit down with you and get a read on why are we making this at all? And should I invite the PM also? Why are we making this feature or this product? What's the problem we're trying to solve? Where are users coming from? What do they want to do? Who are the users for it? So I work with them as another designer. And I get a download of the critical information. What are the problems the design is trying to solve? Because that designer or those designers and I are co-creating this design. Their design will not work without content. And if they've already decided, or if the design components or the design patterns have already specified that this dashboard will have a title and it will have a subline and it will have a link to more information, it will have these cards on it that will have other information and maybe a graph, they need some labels, great, then put those out and go ahead, use the patterns that are in my book or are in the design system and do your best to say what these are. But I'm here to make you successful with this. I'm here to make our customers successful with it. I'm here to make the users successful with it and the business successful with it. So then with that information, we'll sit down together and I might do some rewriting on the fly as we walk through, whether it's one screen or multiple screens. But much more often, I'll be asking a huge number of questions. And I'll be looking at things very critically and saying, what, like, how do they know to click here? Like, oh, they want it. Why would they click here? What do they need to know? Oh, we're giving them a pop-up that says you need to do a thing. Well, what's their motivation when they see that pop-up, and can we reflect it there? So I'm asking them a huge number of questions, and I'm frequently making mental notes for myself of where I need to spend some more time on it. And then after I'm told it's exhausting when I take them through this and they have to walk me through all their decisions. And then I say at the end of this half hour or whatever it's been, I say, great, I think I have time to work on this and give you some options for these places we talked about. In this time frame, will that work for you? And sometimes it doesn't, and they say, oh, actually, I need it for a thing later. And I go, well, let's negotiate. Or I say, hey, that review later, let's just put a banner on it that says, you know, Torrey's proposing new strings before this time. And that usually is okay, right? Because people understand that making product takes time. So I'm working as a metaphor I really like is, it's kind of terrible though. You know, the old timey fire department response of like, oh, there's a person trapped in a burning building. We're going to take out the tiny trampoline and hold it for them. And the tiny trampoline only works if there are multiple people around the edge pulling against each other really hard. Really hard. And that's our jobs as part of the product team, is to pull against each other really hard together to get it so that it will land in the right place.
Right. Thanks so much, Torrey. So we probably have time for one more question, and Lyndall's asked a doozy, so we might make this our last question. As a sole product content designer, starting fresh in a company with basically all the things you mentioned in your slides, how would you prioritize where to spend your time? For instance, on creation, organization, publishing, etc. How do you do it all or not do it all? So you're at day one, you're the first content designer. What's your strategy?
The day one strategy is to ask so many questions and to be reflecting those answers back to the company and saying, okay, you want words on this. Why do you think words will help? How does this make us money? How does this save us money? How does this help the user? Who's our user? All of those great questions are the first job. Then when you have the answers to those, you can start to ask other people, what is the priority? Is the priority making money or saving money? Is it helping this user or helping this other user? and let other people tell you the organizational answers to those questions. And believe them, at least until you can establish enough relationships to influence it in a better direction. So yeah, that's my short answer to that.
No, that's a wonderful short answer. Thank you, Torrey. That's been incredible. And yeah, we've had lots of great questions. So thanks everyone who's contributed. I think it's been a fantastic discussion. So thanks so much, Torrey. We do want to get people out of here in a few minutes. So we'll just make a few quick announcements. So if you have anything you'd like to share yourself, as I said, so that could be a job offering, a course that you're running yourself, an event that you're running, or anything else you'd like to share with the community, please pop that into the chat now. Sorry, Lorian, did you have a hand raised? Did you want to?
Yeah, excuse me, sorry. Swapnil had to leave, but he's asked me to remind people about his Write the Docs event. So Write the Docs is coming up this year. So the call for proposals and ticket sales will be on mid-June. And there's a Write the Docs event in Brisbane in late July. So I'll pop those links in the chat. Thanks, Angus.
And Write the Docs is the event for technical writers. So if anyone doesn't know, and yeah, so maybe some of you are thinking of jumping from product content to technical writing. Sometimes it can go the other way. But yeah, really great events that Swapnil organises. Just a bit about the meetup. So our next meetup is going to be on the 27th of June, and we're going to be having Deborah Carver as our guest. So Deborah is another superstar. She, for those of you who don't know her, she writes a newsletter called The Content Technologist, and she's someone who just knows an enormous amount about kind of doing marketing in a smart way. So she's going to be talking about knowledge graphs and how to structure content for an AI world. So it is going to be that AI talk that we were always going to have an AI talk, but I think this is really around writing content with the knowledge that it is going to be consumed by AI and how you actually structure your content smartly with that in mind. So I think it's going to be fabulous. So we'll see you next month for that. We also have, just to boast a bit about how well organised we are, we do have speakers lined up for the 2 months after that as well. So in July, we're going to be having Rich Prowse from Content Design London, one of our colleagues there. Rich is fantastic. You'll really enjoy him. And then on the 29th of August, our friend Matt Frenwick from True North Content in Canberra is going to be our guest. So we do still have spots for the rest of the year open. We'd really encourage people to put yourself forward if there's something you'd like to talk about. And we'd especially like to encourage people who are maybe dipping their toes into speaking for the first time. You don't have to have a book published. You don't have to have done lots of speaking to talk at the meetup. Think of it as a safe space where you can, you can share. If you have something interesting to share, we want to hear it, especially from sort of diverse voices and perspectives. So we have a form on the meetup, on the main meetup page, where you can express interest or feel free to just get in touch with one of us. We'd love to hear from you. Question from Christy about mentoring. If anyone offers mentoring, if anyone's offering mentoring support, please just maybe have a chat with Christy. Second edition of Torrey's book, not until next summer. So thanks for those comments and announcement. Do sign up for our YouTube channel. We are starting to put talks on YouTube. We've had some questions about last month's talk from Mary. We're not sure if we're going to be able to put that one up because of some of the sort of proprietary content that Mary talked about. So that one might have to be just for the people who are here, unfortunately, but as much as possible, we are going to be putting the talks up, and including talks from the past, but we do have to get in touch with the speakers to confirm that they're happy for us to do that. So that might take a bit of time, but in the meantime, like and subscribe, and Torrey's talk will be up there. Lyndall mentioned the training from Content Design London. So we do have a couple of training courses coming up. The Foundation in Content Design, which is the sort of the base level course, we're actually running next week, and there are some spaces left in that course if anyone happens to have Thursday and Friday of next week free and would like to learn some content design, and then the advanced course on the 1st and 2nd of August. And still spaces for that one as well, but that one's actually selling pretty fast, so you might want to get in ASAP on that one. So that's pretty much it from us. Brock, hi Brock. Brock has a recruiting plug for a content model at Bupa. Fantastic. And the link to the YouTube channel, yes, it's just see if I can remember it. It's basically youtube.com/@ we are content SD. I think that's right. Someone click on that and tell me if it's a 404.
That's the right one.
That's the right one. Great, thanks, Lauren. So yeah, so we'll finish proceedings there. But thank you once again to our fabulous guest Torrey. Thank you all for being here, and we will see you next month.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.